Silver Oaks is a display of publications and books by CPR faculty and CPR research teams, which would also be, it would be great if you could spare a few moments over the next 2 days to look through these, and if we can find people to sign things for you, we'd be happy to do that as well, since a lot of CPR faculty who have authored those are here over the 2 days. I'd also like to draw your attention to your kit. We've made some efforts this time to be both eco-friendly as well as socially responsible while putting, sort of selecting items to put in the conference kit. The transition out of plastic bottles to non-plastic things has been relatively easy, as establishments like IHC have sort of stepped up to do that. But sort of to go beyond that and source bags and notebooks which are produced by NGOs that work on the field, brown paper pens from Grow Grameen, folders which are made from cotton paper, from Papertree. Sort of these are the partners that we'd like to appreciate today in helping us put together an eco-friendly kit for CPR Dialogues 2020. Every opportunity is not to be missed to push the agendas that we want to. So welcome back. I also hope you're live tweeting at #CPR Dialogues 2020. That's really important for us to amplify these conversations outside of sort of hallowed spaces like the India Habitat Center. That's also very much part of CPR's mandate, and we'd like your help to do that. Without further ado, let's move to the next panel. In the 2 upcoming panels, CPR Dialogues will focus on 2 critical elements of the Indian economy: jobs and agriculture. Both are issues that have relentlessly plagued our past and continue to concern us in the present, but they're also issues that are absolutely imperative as we hurtle through rapid changes towards the future, and it's this sort of futuristic outlook that we are trying to bring to the dialogues today. On the next panel titled Creating an Inclusive Economy in a Digital World, I'd like to invite onto the dais Sabina Diwan, who is a Senior Visiting Fellow at Center for Policy Research, but also the co-founder of the Just Jobs Network. CPR is very privileged to have a partnership with the Just Jobs Network. It's called the Jobs Initiative, and CPR and JJN together hope to put out a body of work. I work with Sabina closely, and so I'm saying that with a lot more feeling, to really work on issues of jobs and employment, and how we can sort of guide or shape the discourse going forward. Sabina, the floor is yours.
So good morning, everybody. Good morning. One more time. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you all. Thank you all so much for being here today for this 2020 edition of the CPR Dialogues. It is a real privilege for me to be a Senior Visiting Fellow at the Center for Policy Research, an institution that really leads a lot of the very intellectual but grounded conversations that these troubled times in our world call for. As Mukta mentioned, I work closely with the economics and the urban team there, and it's, again, one of my very fortunate privileges to work with people like Mukta Naik and Partho Mukhopadhyay, who are my close colleagues in everything that I'm going to be talking about today. So Ian Goldwyn from the University of Oxford always likes to start these talks with, with saying that today is the slowest day of the rest of our lives. So why don't you look around and take stock of where you are? Because from here on out, things are only going to get faster and faster. That is the nature and the sentiment that we sort of experience with technology and in this highly technological 21st century world today. It reflects the fact, this statement reflects the fact that technology is completely upending the way that you and I live and work. We no longer have the luxury to talk about the future of work, right? The future is now. Again, technology is completely upending the way that we live and work today. In this second decade, of the 21st century, we now have an idea about how this technological transformation is going to unfold. So we can no longer just keep talking about it as something that is in the future. In some ways, I believe that this debate on technology that we have in this economy today is not that much different than the debate that we had about globalization in the 90s and the early 2000s, right? We've heard a lot, if you were part of the previous session, the previous high-powered guests that we had, that were talking a lot about the impact of globalization and how we're starting to see a manifestation. What do I mean by that? Globalization succeeded in lifting millions out of poverty. But at the same time, it actually did leave millions behind and exacerbated inequality. The opportunities and challenges that we stand to experience in this new technological world are not that dissimilar from what we experienced with the ups and downs of globalization. On the one hand, we see with technology that there is a clear potential to enhance productivity, to improve transparency in governance, to scale up the delivery of services, and to provide development interventions that are much larger and much faster than we have been able to in the past. On the other hand, we've all heard of these discussions, and we've all been part of these discussions that talk about the fear of automation actually destroying jobs that may actually exacerbate unemployment. We've already seen an uptick in unemployment to 6.1%. I personally think that perhaps some of those fears are a little exaggerated. Nonetheless, the prospect of automation is real. And as we're seeing an uptick in unemployment, how does automation stand to exacerbate that trend? We also wonder whether our service-led growth model actually creates a competitive advantage for India to stake a claim in knowledge value chains. So many do, in fact, argue that we haven't been as successful in claiming our share in product value chains. But now, as the new knowledge economy emerges, and we talk about big data and sharing of information, is it possible that India could stake a claim in knowledge value chains and higher value-added activities, potentially? We also see the rapid proliferation of the gig economy, right? The Uber and Olas, the Zomatos and Dunzos, the Etsy's and the Amazons, the WhatsApps and the share chats. How will this gig economy change the employment landscape? Will we see a rise in self-employment? With informal employment already at 68%, if we just look at non-agricultural unemployment, it's at 68%. Will this trend be exacerbated, right? As we see more and more workers that are self-employed, that are no longer getting benefits that are provided by their employers, and benefits get increasingly delinked from workers, do we see an uptick in informal employment? Will this form of gig work increase precariousness in the labor market? 71%, and this figure always gets me, 71% of regular wage workers do not have a written contract, right? As we see a proliferation of the gig economy and gig work, and particularly cloud-based work, where people are working from home doing things like tagging or accounting work potentially from home for companies that are potentially based in other countries, do we see the potential to exacerbate this kind of workplace precarity where people actually don't have written contracts, and if a company shuts down, then the workers left high and dry without any legal recourse to actually appeal and get their wages for the work that they've already done? So all of these are really important questions, but perhaps the most important question in my mind is the question about whether technology will exacerbate inequality the way that globalization has. So we know that technology is skill biased. If you don't have a population that has the requisite levels of education, they will not be able to participate in a technologically driven 21st century economy. Do women, for instance, have the same access to technology, education, and skills as their male counterparts in order to be able to participate in such an economy? Only 46% of women between the ages of 15 and 65 actually own mobile phones. And of those 46%, so that's 1 in 2 women between the ages of 15 and 65 do not own mobile phones. And of the ones that do own mobile phones, only 1 in 4 actually have smartphones. I think the data is pretty stark here in terms of the ways that we still have to go in terms of providing equitable access, not just to the technology itself, but also to the education and skills. Formal skills training in this labor force is only 2%. So only 2% of our labor force actually has formal skills training. The percentage of women from that 2% is negligible, right? So in some ways, technology, as we confront this big behemoth that is completely changing and upending the way that we live and work, these are very real questions that we need to spend more time investigating and learning in deeper and more nuanced ways about. And it is a real joy to be part of the CPR team and my own organization as well, the Just Jobs Network, investigating some of these very important questions. We just received a grant from the International Development Research Center, which is the Canadian government's research foundation, to study the way that women interface with this new emerging technological world in India and Sri Lanka. And the second is investigating in some detail home-based gig work for women, in particular, in countries like Cambodia, Myanmar, and Thailand. So with that, it is a real treat for me, certainly, but also for all of you. We have 3 speakers that are at the cutting edge of this technological revolution. So it is my real pleasure to invite up on stage first Rituparna Chakraborty, who is the co-founder and executive vice president of TeamLease Services. Thanks so much. Next, I would like to invite Himanshu Wardhan, who is the managing director of Etsy India. Thanks so much. And last but not least, Mr. Burgess Malu, who's the Director of Public Policy and Policy Communications at ShareChat. Nice to have you. Have a seat. So thank you all for joining us. And I think first we'd like to start just with some opening remarks, first about your own organization and what your own organization does. But then also, in your view, what are the most salient features of this new technological revolution? How is technology actually affecting the way that we live and work in particular? And what, from your perspective, are the most pressing issues where we should focus our attention? So, Ritu, why don't we start with you? I'd love to hear kind of your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thanks so much, CPR. What you asked essentially could take a day-long discussions, all the points that you, but I try and cover as much as possible. So I am one of the co-founders of an organization called TeamLease. We are a 3E company, essentially an organization which is trying to innovate right at the intersection of employment, employability, and ease of doing business. We have, over the last decade and a half, employed more than 1.8 million people. And at this point of time, as I sit in front of you, we have about 230,000 youth as employees, temp workers, trainees, apprentices deployed across length and breadth of the country. We work with an organization which is representative of India and corporate India today. Very few sectors that we don't engage with. And I think my job is such where I do have a real-time view of the agony and ecstasy of Indian labor market. I think I'm here to kind of give you probably a little bit of an insight of what's happening at the grassroots. I guess given the space that we operate in, the conversations around jobs and skills is something that we hear or get questioned on every minute, every second. There's a lot that's going on, of course. But just coming right to the point about how technology is essentially impacting labor markets in India, I think there are demand side issues and then there are supply side issues. In terms of the demand side, I think we've had, there has been, the net sum of the pros and cons I feel is positive because I think the number of organizations that come into a proliferated have been able to expand into India and take advantage of the Indian context is incredible. It's not just global giants of the sort of in the e-commerce space. I think we see so many new ideas, internet-based, mobile-based ideas cropping up every day. And while it has an online interface of engaging with the customers, but the entire supply chain works in such a way that it has to employ a large number of people across the different stages of from the order fulfillment perspective. And I think that opens up a lot of has opened up a lot of opportunities for today's youth. I think the lesser I say about the e-commerce organizations, I think it's a technology brilliance, but I think they actually are employing tons and tons of people across the country. And the beauty of some of these models is that they are not just employing workers in the cities. I think they've been able to take employment beyond the cities. Has automation had impact on any of these, what's going on in the current situations? It's something that we are noticing is extremely, it's something which is extremely sector specific and job specific. Clearly there are routine manual jobs where there is a impact of automation. I think those jobs are definitely getting lesser and lesser. There are job roles that used to exist with us 15 years back, and we see that there is a diminishing curve around those jobs clearly. But side by side, every day, we are seeing new job roles emerging, and in many cases, that's on account of technology interventions that's happening at different workplaces. I think more importantly, the impact of technology in changing the labor compliance ecosystem or the benefits ecosystem. I think ease of doing business has greatly been benefited by technology being adopted not just by organization but by government in a big way. It's of course not holistic and not complete, but the fact that government is trying to leverage technology to make some of the, in any way to encourage ease of doing business, to making things presence-less, cashless, paperless, I think has huge advantage for businesses, because one of the reasons jobs were constrained in India and are still constrained probably is because of because of ease of doing business being so great. And I think I have seen employers prima facie benefiting from some of these changes. Have we done everything that we ought to? Of course not, but net sum, I see some positive trajectories when it comes to how technology or digital has influenced workplaces. I've just thrown some paint on the wall, Sabina. If there are any specifics, I can probably take on thereon.
Thank you so much. Let me turn now to Himanshu. Himanshu, Ritu mentioned the demand side, and I was wondering if you could potentially elaborate, tell us a little bit more about Etsy India, and then kind of elaborate on the positive or negative, however you see it, impact of technology on the actual creation of jobs.
Sure. Very excited to be here today. Thanks a lot, Sabina and CPR. I think I've expressed it multiple times. This is my favorite place to be in Delhi, Etsy, so thanks a lot for doing it here. Etsy, so I manage the Etsy India business. Etsy is a global marketplace. It's a NASDAQ listed company. It's a global marketplace for unique and handmade products. We have about 2.5 million creative makers or sellers in different parts of the world, out of which 87% are women. 97% of them are home-based makers or sellers, and 53% of them claim that they started their entrepreneurial journey, that they became a business or they started to earn money from Etsy, from the designs or the craft form that they are practicing. That's just a global context. We have over 60 million very unique products around the world, buyers and sellers in different parts of the world. That's a global context, but in India, what we are doing is really going to different parts of India, urban areas, semi-urban areas, and rural areas, and trying to get people who are designing or making products themselves in very small setup, mostly in their homes, getting them onto our platform and by enabling them in whatever fashion that we can do, and then providing them access to over 45 million buyers across the world. We have seen multiples of such cases, whether it's our seller called Ruchi. She's based out of Lucknow. She's done more than 50,000 maternity wear gowns, customized maternity wear gowns in over 70 countries across the world. She's probably a big exporter, but most of us don't even know about it, and she's just been doing it out of her home in Lucknow. So that's a bit of context of what we are doing in India. In terms of your questions regarding, what is, my view is that technology, if there are reasons that obviously technology and automation create disruption and that might take away jobs, but technology also is the solution. And I believe that we're the solution part of technology maybe, because what we are doing is that if we were to go back, I'll actually talk about it in terms of two scenarios and two case examples. If you were a small business or a small person just making and producing stuff at home, 20 or 30 years back, if you had to start a business, you had to open a physical store. Your access to the market would be restricted to the geographic area, and you would need a lot of capital. You would need at least 5-10 lakh rupees to get started, to keep inventory and open the space. That is at minimum. What a global technology platform like Etsy has done, or not just Etsy, but other platforms as well, that you just need an internet connection, you just need a smartphone to get online and start to sell to global buyers. So that's one power of technology and being part of the solution. The second one being more in the context of women. We see the highest participation of women on our platform, either as buyers or sellers, or even in terms of employees. More than 50% of our employee base is women. More than half of our executive team is women. So in that context, somebody like Ruchi, or there are a lot of other women in different parts of India who had to leave their jobs or their primary work for family considerations, and then few years down the line, when they wanted to come back to the workforce, the traditional sort of jobs were difficult to get to. So a platform like Etsy or a social media platform then provides people like Ruchi or other people an opportunity to get back to the workforce in their own way, with a lot of flexibility, where they can devote time to being a mother, at the same point of time starting work in their small way. And why I'm telling this about Ruchi again and again, because her husband left his job. The business became so big that her husband actually left his job and joined Ruchi to be part of this full time as well. So both of these examples would kind of illustrate that if technology or automation is part of the problem, it is also part of the solution. And that's how we need to think about how do we leverage technology to solve the problem that some parts of technology might be causing.
Thank you, Himanshu. I would like to kind of go into asking a follow-up, exercise my moderator privilege here. So my question is, this form of entrepreneurship and technology being a solution, by saying to women that, we are giving you the option of staying at home, we know that women prize flexibility to be able to balance domestic responsibilities with income generation activities. But are we, in this case, actually also reinforcing the kinds of patriarchal norms that keep women in the house, as opposed to giving them an opportunity to go out into and push factories and push other employers to provide safe environments for women, provide safe transport? We're all aware of all the challenges and obstacles that women face. So in this kind of discussion on female entrepreneurship, I'd love to get your perspective, in a very candid conversation about this particular issue.
No, that's a great question. I mean, absolutely, that's a great question. Take a step back, irrespective of gender, the nature of jobs and work is changing. So we see a lot of freelancers or gig economy workers not going to office, working from home, making home as their base, or a co-working space or a cafe as their base. So I think that's a general trend that is going on, and women are participating in a similar fashion. But obviously with women, it's a relevant question to think whether we are typecasting and stereotyping women in being part of that network or not. I actually differ with that, because think about women who are creating a business and a brand. They are actually shattering that patriarchy, because what they are doing. So I'll probably give you an alternate. Let's say somebody like Ruchi were to go and join a workplace. She'll be one of the employees in a workplace. Okay, and definitely there is need to provide all of the facilities that is needed and enablement for her. But then being an individual and building a business, she's created a brand for herself. She's created a brand, she's created a business. She's gotten this thousands of reviews and dedicated buyers from different parts of the world. So I believe from that point of view that her workplace might be her home, but she has actually shattered patriarchy in a big way by asserting herself and creating a business independently, where she's now employing her husband to be part of that business.
Mm-hmm. Ritu, would you agree with that?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think, if you take a vote amongst this audience, how many people would like to work from home? That would be a gender agnostic response today. And hence, I guess, I don't think, and I think a lot of startups for that matter, if you ask them, I've heard they've started from their homes or garages. So, but that's just the starting point. I think what women essentially need is the choice to decide. It's as long as they have a choice, whether they want to work from home, they want to go out and work, as long as the choice is there with them and there are no constraints to it, it really doesn't matter. And from that perspective, I guess Ruchi is doing great. She's leveraged the benefits of being in a known environment and an environment that she's used to, and then she's created a business out of it. It's very much possible that very soon Ruchi will move out of her home because of the scale at which she's operating. And hence, honestly, I think, I don't think in this particular context, that's definitely a challenge. And my question is that if a woman is able to build a career or is able to look at a livelihood options and a viable one sitting out of his, or sitting out of her own homes, then why not? And we are already talking, we are in an era where we are already talking about building presence-less business. We are already, again, digital is going to be a big leverage in that, because telepresence is a way of life for all of us. I mean, we are sitting in one part of the country, in one office, and we are having our meetings. So I guess it really, the presence of the location or the definition of workplace today has gotten challenged. Workplace is not what it used to be. It's not the traditional construct of four walls or the way we've already envisaged. And hence, honestly, that's definitely not one of the biggest challenges women have. If we were talking about women labor workforce participation, there are different and more critical issues to be talked about and spoken about.
Thank you. I do want to come back and also pick your brain about the issue of education and skills. But as we segue into this conversation about the potential barriers that women might face even to participate in a digital economy from home, I think it would be a good point, Burgess, to hear from you. In some ways, I think you'll talk a little bit about what ShareChat does, but in some ways, I think ShareChat has really shattered some of the barriers that women might confront to actually be able to participate. So if you could tell us a little bit more about ShareChat and then kind of speak to what you see are kind of these broad challenges in this new 21st century technological era, and specifically to the barriers confronting women.
Sure. So I represent ShareChat, which is an Indian language social media platform, which was founded about 5 years ago. Today we have 65 million users across India. We don't operate in English. We operate across 15 Indian languages. And what we have seen is women participation, because of the fact that they can converse in their own language, is far higher than other platforms. The language barrier is a very big barrier for a lot of women because historically women have been underrepresented both at school levels, and so their education is not that great. And even on the internet, because of the fact that they are at home, they don't have money to buy new phones. Their husbands would probably get the latest phone, they get a hand-me-down. Language has been a very significant barrier. But what we've noticed over the last 5 years is women have found internet platforms to do very innovative things. One of the largest sections on our platform as we grew were things like mehendi designs, sari blouse designs. And going forward, what we realized is that not just could they, not just sharing these images of these designs that they have drawn or made at home, they could also sell it locally. So while Etsy takes folks, stuff from here abroad and globally, what we try to do is see how they can sell their wares locally in tier 2, tier 3 towns of India. And a lot of times you'll wonder, you want to get mehendi designs done, where do you go and find someone who can do it for you within your small town, within your small city? And that's where we realized there's an opportunity for folks to make money sitting at home, working from home. And fair disclosure, I also get to work from home. So to answer Sabina's question, it's quite wonderful. And this has grown significantly. We've seen in some language options on the platform, for instance, in Malayali, 40% of our user base is women, which is very significantly high. Because if you look at other social media platforms, say for maybe Instagram, the percentage of women users on social media is far less than the number of males. You look at even platforms like Snapchat, you look at dating platforms, the percentage of men versus women on these platforms is highly skewed. And I think for us, we have realized that if users can find a language option that they are comfortable with, they will take on these platforms and use these platforms far more than platforms where it's an only English option. And to answer your question about going forward, how does this help? The fact that today you have an opportunity to find buyers is very significant, because even though the government will encourage you with these mudra loans, and you have investors or people willing to bet on you, generally the first concern is, where do I find buyers for my product? I know I make great idlis at home, I make great batter or mehendi designs, sari blouses, etc. But how will I find a market for myself? And the ability to find these buyers on a social media platform or on e-commerce platforms that allow for such localized selling is a fantastic option for people. Up until 10 years back, the idea of being an entrepreneur, most parents would say, listen, don't take these risks, go for a government job. The next 30 years, you're going to get your, you'll get a salary each month. If you join Air India, maybe after 3 months, but you'll get your salary. But now more and more people want to be entrepreneurs. You want to be your own boss. And you have ability to get credit to start these kind of businesses. And the fact that technology is now enabling you to also find buyers for your product is very significant.
That's great. One of the questions I constantly ask myself when I look at the current labor market indicators and how, as I mentioned, we've got an uptick in unemployment. We see stubbornly high informal employment. We see a greater contractualization. When I look at these data, I frequently ask myself, how can it be that we have so many people working so hard to improve the labor market, and from NGOs to businesses to government efforts to emphasis on skilling, and yet we still struggle? And one of the answers that I've come up with is the fact that we often have these big, broad brushstroke macro solutions that don't necessarily bear fruit at the local community levels, right? And here, I think what ShareChat is doing is so important, because operating in vernacular languages is actually underscoring the fact that community solutions can actually bear more fruit than some of these big, broad brushstroke kinds of interventions.
Right. No, definitely, because the fact that a lot of people in India are not very comfortable with English. They may speak English, or at least have learned English in school, but for them, knowing or being able to converse in English on platforms, etc., is very difficult. They find it, which is why you'll see voice notes has become a big part of WhatsApp. People use voice notes a lot. So even folks at home, my house help, etc., we converse on WhatsApp, but it's through voice notes, because voice notes are far easier. Simply because they can read English, so if you write something in English, they'll figure it out, but they can't respond to you in English. But the fact that people are using Indic languages far more, and the geo effect has meant that more and more people across India now have access to the internet, is only a sign that Indic languages is the next frontier. I mean, as recently as 3 years ago, there was a social media CEO out of the US who said that India is too poor a market to bother about. And in the last 6 months, they have launched their product across 7 Indian languages. So that would show you why Indic language space is the future of the internet in India. It is regional. The next set of users are going to come from tier 2, tier 3 India. And you need to provide them opportunities, because these folks want to do something, but they don't have the opportunities to do it like we do in tier 1 cities across India. So if you can provide them an ability to sell products, show them a way to make far more money than they would having a regular 9-to-5 job, with all the safety features that it comes with, they would prefer being an entrepreneur.
Well, I could keep asking questions, and especially, potentially push you a little bit on the last statement that you just made, but I'll hold my tongue. And I want to come back to this element of choice, Ritu. You mentioned that as long as women, or we can broaden that out, this element of choice, to be able to choose what kind of job you want, to be able to actually choose your aspiration and then actually be able to accomplish it and to gain economic mobility. What is it that we need for our young people to actually provide them with the kinds of education and skills? And those two always have to go together. You cannot have skills without education. I will emphasize that point until I'm blue in the face. But what are the kinds of education and skills that our young people need in order to be able to succeed and to really actually make that choice free of the kinds of socioeconomic constraints, whether it's gender, whether it's socioeconomic, whether it's caste, whether it's religion? What do they need to actually be able to exercise the element of choice and be successful in a technologically driven economy?
So I'm probably one of those people who've always ranked skill higher than knowledge. But I'll try and explain why. I think National Occupation Code data suggests that 90% of the jobs in India require skills but zero knowledge. But 90% of the kids who are coming out of our colleges and universities have knowledge and zero skills. Now, let's spend time on the definition of the word knowledge. I think my issue currently is the way our education system have been imparting knowledge. What's the purpose of knowledge, and what essentially are we teaching in our schools and colleges? Because when we are talking about an era which is, you like started by that amazing quote about today is going to be the slowest day of the rest of my life, I think if that's the kind of reality today, I think what's the kind of knowledge that I should be focusing on? For example, my own daughter. I think teaching my daughter a finite set of stuff which are established and captured in books is essentially not going to help her bend the curve in her favor. I think the defocus, or at the moment, the prevalent education regime that's going on is focusing on a finite set of specifics that kids need to do well or learn, and if they do well, then they're getting grades, and so on and so forth. They are being prepared for a definite, predictable world. But honestly, the world is no more going to be predictive and definitive the way it was. And that's why I see so many engineers. Engineers are my favorite topic these days, and have been for a while. We see so many engineers, especially when the recent set of incidents that happened in the technology world, in the IT industry, where you must have heard about so many jobs are being made redundant, so many kids are out in the street. And then I heard about this particular youth who in Pune actually went and committed suicide. And not because he lost a job, because he anticipated losing a job. And that made national news, by the way. Now, it really worried me that this kid has some kind of decent IQ. That's why he became an engineer. So how helpless he must have felt to actually go and take his own life, that he actually did not see any hope beyond what he was currently doing. And that brings me back to the question that what are those skill sets that we should be preparing the new generation with? I do hold the current regimes of the erstwhile existing education systems, the way the ICSEs and the CBSEs to begin with, because it starts in the school, are structured. It's preparing kids for a very structured, definitive, predictive world. But the ability to learn on the go, making them curious, are they solving problems? I think these skill sets we're completely missing when we're talking about education and knowledge in this country. I do agree, and from where you are coming, education and knowledge is important, but I think the nature of education which are being imparted to our kids, where they are completely at a disadvantage when it comes to the non-cognitive skill sets that they need, is essentially the biggest challenge. And hence, given what exists today, I feel skills is a much important layer on top which can at least give them some kind of a respite to have livelihood options for tomorrow. Is this stacking going to work? Where I'm stacking skills over and above the layer of education is going to work in the long run? Absolutely not. Education needs to fall in place. Education needs to act as a foundation which helps you imbibe skills, any skills, and much quicker than what we are able to do today. The fact that Sabina started that only 2% of our kids or our workforce today, formal workforce, has any kind of formal vocational training is a reality, but that's because we do not celebrate skills. I think culturally, India as an organizations don't believe in celebrating skills. Apprenticeships are always for someone else's child, not our own. But that's not honestly the future, and that's really not going to work. I feel that we need to dovetail skilling and livelihood abilities and non-cognitive elements at a very early stage in our education framework. And if that happens, this conversation where we're debating education versus skills will become redundant. And that's how we can prepare our future generation for a world which is highly unpredictable, which cannot be, it's definitely not definite, and it's unstructured, and hence that's essentially where we are, and that's how we should view the future when it comes to education.
Absolutely, Ritu. I 100%, well actually I 99% agree with you. Because I think what you said about education needs to be, needs to help in being able to absorb and imbibe skills. I think that's a fundamental component, and we need to start in the education system and with education reform to prepare young people for an unpredictable world. I'm with you 100%. The only 1% that I have a slight disagreement with is this idea of skills coming on top of the education system. If you have a country with a limited number of resources and limited policy bandwidth, limited attention spans, if we start putting all our eggs in the skills basket, I think we undermine the kinds of deep and important reforms we need in the education system, and skills alone cannot be a Band-Aid solution for 12 years, 10 years, or even 8 years of a poor quality education. But I'm with you on the fundamental need to rethink knowledge versus literacy versus non-cognitive. I couldn't agree with you more on those aspects. So Himanshu, one question for you. How do you kind of work with these, I think you said 87% of your user base in India is women. How do you work with them in terms of getting them ready to participate on your platform? What kind of hand-holding, what kind of assistance does Etsy India provide them to facilitate that kind of engagement?
Sure. So that 87% is a global number, but we see similar numbers in India or similar levels of participation, just as a correction. So what we've realized that, there are a lot of assumptions what you need to, what kind of skills you need to have in order to work on a technology company or for a technology company. As an example, I'm not an engineer. I don't know line of a coding, and I'm heading the India business for a technology company. So that will give you a little bit of sense that technology has different parts of it. And our mission is to think about how do we make it so simple for the end user so that they can concentrate on making and designing the product while everything else can be taken care of by the technology platform. And there are different levels of enablements, whether it is about, so what we do is, first of all, we have onboarding associates spread across different parts of India who help out and handhold large section of the population of the people who are coming online to get onto the platform. Etsy is all about storytelling. What buyers are buying, not just the product, they're also buying part of the story of the maker. So we have a team that helps out people to articulate about their stories. Then once they are online, we give them all the feedback and help in order to make sure that their presence comes out as a nice brand in terms of photography and a lot of other skill sets. Then we have certain enablements with the payments and shipping. So there's a lot of mental block. Hey, what if the order comes from US or UK? How am I going to ship that order? And it just becomes a mental block, and it's not there just in rural areas, but also in urban areas. So we help to kind of solve those mental blocks by working with women and other artisans as well. I think that's the crux of it. To participate and utilize technology, you need to have very minimal understanding of technology. It's almost like if you are able to create a social media profile or operate a chatting platform, you just need 1 or 2 more enablements in terms of payments and shipping to get to the next level. So what we've seen is that we do the initial level of enablement, and once people get online, they get a couple of orders, they do a couple of shipping with our help, they are themselves, they are independent. Then we don't need to help them out. They can think about their own photography. They can think about their own way of shipping the products. You just need to do it at that initial level. And you need to make, which we have always strived to do, you need to make technology and these platforms as simple and as easy to use. And I think that's the key to it.
Thank you. Burgess, that's certainly something that you all have mastered very well, providing access, making it easy to use. What, in your view, are sort of the skills and education story in terms of being able to participate in a technologically driven economy?
So, you know, I kind of disagree with you when you say the education and then the skills
I love
part, right?
disagreements.
Simply because, and don't get me wrong, I do believe that you need a good, strong school education. You do need to understand how to read, write, all of that. But a lot of these activities that folks are doing, sitting at home and you know selling products, is driven by their skills, right? They know how to stitch, they know how to draw, so they know how to do mehendi designs, they know how to make handmade products, and these are skills. This is not something I can go to school and learn. You know, I was very bad at art in school, so. But the fact is, you need some of these skills to start these kind of businesses. And that's a very fundamental piece. Because these people have skills, some of these skills are, hand-me-downs from their parents. They're all part of this larger ecosystem of, some folks are pot makers. They've been doing this for centuries. But now they have an ability to, and the fact that Americans love to, or folks love to take on, these Indian ideas of drinking water from an earthen pot. And it's something that's, it is something that's now picking up globally, right? So you now have people wanting earthen pots to drink water in summer, not drinking refrigerated water. And how do you get these folks who are making these earthen pots in local parts of India to cities, taking them global? It could be lampshades, it could be curtains, stuff like that. And so you need skills. It's the very basic piece of doing this kind of home-based entrepreneurship. The second part is obviously technology has to also be simple. So many of these folks in tier 2, tier 3 India, even though they don't speak a word of English, for them when they want to sign into a platform, they understand sign in. They understand terms like log out. They don't understand the Hindi version or the translated version of it in their own regional language. So they don't speak a word of English, but they'll understand terms like profile, sign out, log out. You put anything else over there and they just want to understand what you're trying to say, even in their own language. And so it's also making it, while it's India language, a lot of the terms have also got to be colloquial because that's what they understand. And figuring that out, understanding how users behave on social media platforms on the internet is, I think, a very important part. And that was what our learning was, because over the first 3 years of building out our platform, a very key part or key element of our growth story was going into tier 2 towns across India and understanding from users how they use platforms. Because you can translate, you create a version of your app which is in a local regional language, and you won't see much growth because people won't use the platform. They won't understand how the platform works. But the minute you start understanding how they use platforms, how these users who are, and generally our user base is, their internet age is about 1 or 2 years. They've only come onto the internet about a year or two ago. Prior to that, they had no access to the internet at all. So understanding how they use the internet is also very important in building out products that can help them benefit from the internet.
Thank you. So 2 quick responses because I can't resist. The first being on the issue of entrepreneurship. So the Just Jobs Network recently did a study with support from the Michael and Susan Dell Foundation that asked youth in Sonipat and Faridabad essentially their views of entrepreneurship. And what we found is that most children between the ages of 15 to around 19, 20, first, everybody wants a government job. Everyone's studying for the civil service exam. And when I said, आपको पता है कि नौकरियां बहुत कम हैं और कितने सारे बच्चे कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि ये एग्ज़ाम पास कर दें, sorry for the slipping into Hindi, but the response was, मैम भगवान है ना, क्यों नहीं मिलेगी, हम मेहनत करेंगे तो हमें नौकरी भी मिलेगी. Unfortunately, by the time we get to the age of 20, 23 or so, young people start to realize that perhaps this dream of getting a government job may not actually pan out, in which case they enter either the private sector or potentially some kind of gig work if it's available. And they start to recognize that their expectations, and all this talk of aspirations, that their expectations are actually quite misaligned with what a private sector job has to offer. both in terms of the salary expectations, but also in terms of being prepared for the non-cognitive kinds of demands of a private sector job that they are not ready for. And then, lo and behold, you have this disenchantment with the private sector, and that's when you get young people coming in saying, "Acha chalo, apna hi koi kaam kar lete hain isse acha to." Right? That's, in my view, a big part of the reality of the entrepreneurship story in our nation. It's not the only story, right? We have stories like Ruchi and the element of choice and giving women the option to work from home. But the other side of that entrepreneurship story is this overconfidence in the fact that all young people want to be entrepreneurs, can be entrepreneurs, and will be successful entrepreneurs, which I deeply question. And then just a second very minor point, and then we'll open it up for questions, is this idea of, you mentioned sort of people that have the kinds of skills, whether it's Mehndi designs or, we were doing some field work in Ajmer with a community of women that crochet caps. And in the entire community, all the women were crocheting caps, which would then be collected by one person and taken to the local market. At some point, the market is completely oversaturated with women trying to sell crocheted caps, right? And there's not enough of a market for it. So the point here is that, we might say that, even those forms of entrepreneurship, artisanal work from home requires skills. Absolutely. But does that kind of work actually provide people with economic mobility? Is it going to be enough for a young person at the age of 20, 21, 22, 23, who's doing Mehndi designs to be doing Mehndi designs for the rest of their life, even if they have the option of selling it through the internet or getting a clientele through the internet? And that is why the issue of education and how we actually provide literacy, so relevant knowledge, literacy, and non-cognitive skills to our young people is so critically important, because without it, we're also not giving them the economic mobility, and we're locking them into what is definitely skilled work, but may not be the work that actually allows them to participate in a higher value-added way and productive way in the economy.
Can I just
Please.
To that one. The same work that you did in the northern part of India, that survey, if you would have done the same survey somewhere down south, your response would be very different, Sabina.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And
you are doing it in Sonepat and Faridabad. These are cities so close to Delhi, and Delhi is essentially everybody is in every second person or third person has some government job.
So we've done similar work in Kanchipuram.
But if you go to Andhra Pradesh, everybody's going to want to be an engineer and go to the US,
I mentioned
or an
those
MBA.
too, but we've done work in the south as well that reinforces some of this.
Part here is that I guess that, like you said, that they had a stacking order in their mind, that first is going to be a government job, and if that doesn't work out, then there is something after. I think every job or every livelihood option need not be entrepreneurship, but I think our current challenge is that that optionality and choice doesn't exist amongst our youth. That let me choose what I want. I want to be in a government job, and do we have the infrastructure or access for every individual to make those choices? Definitely is not there. I don't think everybody needs to be an entrepreneur, but if somebody wants to be an entrepreneur and grow and makes that a livelihood option, they should have the choice. And I also feel that somewhere there is a dissonance in terms of the aspiration of what work is and what kind of work is available. And a lot of it is driven by narratives which are maybe in celluloid. I don't know, but I think that's a challenge. And that's why I'm a firm believer that we need to introduce, and I'm a big believer in apprenticeship, that's why. We have to, starting maybe the latter half of the school, post 8th or 9th, and just like how it has happened in some successful countries, get people, get kids exposed to work environment. And the moment they're out there, they will be making those right choices, which are based on alignment of their aspiration and skills rather than maybe what peer network believes or what their parents believe should be their career choices or what looks cool, right? That's it, right now the dissonance is there and it's getting wider day by day. But one of the solutions could be getting them into workplace in a learning environment much earlier than they do currently. And you will see a little bit of rationalization settling in, and these stacks of, or what hierarchy or a caste system and what's a good job and what's not a good job will probably go away.
Yeah. Ritu, I think you constantly underscore that I did absolutely the right thing by hounding you to be here today. So, but with that, let me open it up for questions from the audience. We have about 15 minutes, so we'll take 3 questions to start with, and if we have time, we'll go to a second round. So if you put your hands up. Yes, that sir over there. Yes, sir. Please introduce yourself. No long commentaries, just very quick questions. We want to get as many voices in as possible. So I, please would request to keep it very short.
Thank you very much. As I can make out, it's clearly a nascent sector, and we are assessing as to how it's going to progress further. The question here is basically as to what needs to be done to scale it up, this kind of an activity, to scale it up maybe 10 million times, maybe 100 billion times, if it's going to make that kind of impact on the country. What kind of regulatory system we require to make that happen? What are the obstacles, policy obstacles, that we need to overcome for this kind of thing? And perhaps compare with some other countries where they have a much more successful and buoyant model, which actually minimizes the downside disruptive effect of the technology that you've mentioned. So my question here is basically how, as a policy and the government institution involvement, what actually can be done to make the kind of things that you think need to happen here? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Other questions? Let's take 3 questions because we have very limited time. So maybe we'll take, I want to make sure that people at the back also get a chance. So I see a hand in the far left. Yeah.
Hi. Thank you for the panel for an insightful commentary on the topic of the day. My question is, how do we guarantee...
Please introduce yourself.
I'm Sri Lakshmi. I work at the Ola Mobility Institute. And I was wondering, how do we secure income through these livelihoods, not just in terms of the earnings of the day, but also securing it against contingencies? Thank you.
Thank you. We'll take a couple more questions. My goodness, lots of hands. So perhaps this gentleman in the back, and then here. We'll take these 3, and then, yeah, these 3. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Bharat, and I represent Chanakya Chakra Discussion Forum. My question is to Madam Chakraborty. On TeamLease, I would request you to shed some light on what will be the employee benefits. Just as Sabina mentioned in her introductory speech, I would like to, if you could shed some more light on what will be the regulatory support or provisions that we could provide as an institution to the fluidity of the employees. So, thank you.
So should we turn to the panelists, or should I finish taking some more questions?
I mean, now that you've taken all the questions, you take all the questions.
Take all of them, and then? Are you okay with that? Yeah. Okay. So we'll just take a couple more, and then we'll just turn to answers.
Well, I'm Suresh Panjay, a journalist. I wish to clarify and confirm data bank from which you compile all the facts and figures, then has the digital mode of jobs, help the SHGs, self-help groups. And is there any protection and insurance for the provider of the products and demands and services? And the fourth one is standardization and quality control. How do you ensure this? I mean, the branding part of it.
Thank you. Yeah. And we'll take these 2, and then that's it. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Rahul Prakash. I'm an entrepreneur with a keen interest in public policy in India. So as you have mentioned, that technology has democratized the labor market opportunities, both for the providers like you who provide the opportunities and the availers who avail of those opportunities. So in this light, I want to ask that how do you see the public policy in India? Has it democratized the options for people to come in to provide these opportunities? And if it has provided such opportunities, has it helped you to penetrate more, or has it hindered the growth of this? My special reference would be to why you are going after tier 2, tier 3 city, as Burgess said. So why not you are collaborating with the government, like working with the National Rural Livelihood Missions, so that you can scale up the SCGs and the women working over there? Thank you.
Thank you. And one last question right here, and then we'll take from the panelists.
I'm Anupam Khanna. I've been actually looking at this issue of digital technology and how it's changing the nature of economies. You have focused on what I call very basic marketplace technology and how that is changing the organization of highly decentralized work, primarily artisanal. And this is the experience around the world shows this sort of thing can lead, you're talking about people, whether it's small scale individual producers, but a modern economy, the reason firms exist is some things require collaboration and you need groups of people working together. The worry that we have here is that a marketplace type of approach, which is all we are doing currently, all three of you, except TeamLease itself is an aggregator. What happens is that this either marginalizes in the sense that the rent, that the income to the final producer tends to become minimal. And the economic pressures that get generated are such. Eventually what happens, aggregators come in and they monopolize. That's what's happening, Amazon, et cetera, et cetera. And so my question is, actually, is this the nature of technology that is changing the nature of work in India? If this is it dangerous going forward? And will it not exacerbate inequalities and actually even poorer quality of work? I think Sabina was trying to hint towards that. And we then try to avoid, I'm saying, 90% of entrepreneurship, not just here, in most developing countries, is out of necessity. Yeah. It's not by choice. Because they can't do anything else, they have to feed themselves. Right. So are we actually pushing the country more into that side with this approach to technology?
Yeah, thank you. And we'll just take one more because this gentleman has been very patient. And then my panelists will have 2 minutes to respond.
Yeah, my suggestion is that the way we had an edge over software earlier, in early 80s till today, we should have some attempt to hardware technology also. Until we venture upon hardware, we will be left out in software, and China and Taiwan is taking over. So it can be a traditional family way business can be passed on to children. That can help a lot and to improve the economy of country. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so now we'll turn to the panelists. Maybe this time I'll go in this order, Burgess, and give you a chance. You have about 2 minutes.
Sure. So I think to answer the question on the policy side that I think both these gentlemen raised, one is the simplification of how people can start doing business in India. Registering your brand, getting a trademark, your GST process. Because for a lot of people, this is a very significant problem. How do these small folks figure out the taxation mechanism, especially when GST rates change every 2-3 months and they don't know, okay, am I in the 12% bracket or the 5% bracket or whatever else. So one is that part. The second is, I think, the availability of credit. Credit had opened up, then it slowed down, but the availability of credit for people who want to start their own business. And generally, for such folks, the availability of credit is generally from government banks or from the government itself. And private sector banks will be very cautious with giving loans to small town folks, especially considering the fact that a lot of private banks are not even in these small towns. So that's the second piece. The third is the fact that getting some sort of insurance or some sort of protection from social security from the government. Because it is one of the reasons that people are scared of joining or being entrepreneurs is the fact that there is no job security, or they feel so. Even if I mean, it's not particularly true. If your business does really well, you are secure, but this feeling that they may not be secure in that job. So I think these are three pieces of the puzzle that are very important for the government or the policy side of ensuring that people who are joining the entrepreneurship side of work feel secure. To answer the other person's question about ensuring the quality of the product and stuff like that, in a marketplace model, the only way for folks to do this is through reviews, through seeing pictures. So if the product is bad, surely there'll be first 3 or 4 people who will get a bad product, but they can read reviews and people will realize, is this a good product or a bad product? That's the only way we can ensure there's quality in the system. Otherwise, as platforms, we cannot go in and check each product and do a quality check. So the only way for that on the technology space is depending on people to leave good reviews or bad reviews. So just like the Uber system, where if it's a badly rated driver, you probably cancel the trip.
Thank you.
Yep.
Himanshu.
I just actually want to address this question on value to the maker, which is a very relevant question. What we have seen actually that people on our platform are getting much more value than they would get, because then they would be selling to some intermediary and all of that. The beauty of our platform, I can't talk about other platforms, and you spoke about one of them. Beauty of our platform is we have very strict policy around who can sell onto the platform. So we have clear guidelines that people who is involved in making the product, either themselves or designing the product, can be on the platform. We do not want and we do not like resellers to be on the platform. So it's a very strict policy. But your question is relevant. In case of a large mass merchandise platform that can attract a lot of resellers, there is a risk that the end maker will get lesser value. The question on standardization and quality is also interesting, especially in this specific space that we operate in, because quality is very subjective. Actually, even for the same electronic device or for the same phone, quality could mean different thing for different people. It could be quality of camera, it could be quality of build. Now, take it to the level of a clothing or a jewelry piece. In that regard, quality in an online or through a digital setup means how transparent is the person who is selling the product is about their product. I think transparency is the most important thing, and that ensures and sets certain level of expectation with the buyer of what can they expect when the product comes to them. One thing on the, we talked about policy. I think, Burgess is probably much better positioned to comment on that. But even before we think about simplifying the policy, the first step is to get transparency and really good and education of what you actually need to start a business. So it should be as simple as when you go and apply for a particular visa for a different country, you go through a set of 4 questions and then they tell you whether you need a visa, what kind of visa and what documents. I think we just simply, first of all, just need that kind of system, because what we get from different people is that, hey, do I need this? Do I need this? Do I need this? And there's different understanding between different people of what is actually needed to start a business or to become an entrepreneur in this country.
Thank you, Himanshu. So I think the first question that was asked in terms of how do we kind of solve this problem at scale, we believe that through doing 5 things. One is, of course, formalization. We do have almost 88% of our workforce is in informal. Besides the kind of specific labor reform initiative which can drive massive formalization, we feel that GST has been a backdoor most effective labor reform that India has witnessed, which is actually encouraging more formalization of workplaces and hence workforce. Industrialization in essentially the fact that the contribution of manufacturing to overall employment is less than 12% is definitely a challenge. And we have to do something to kind of change that statistics in a big way. We probably cannot touch China's level of almost 50%, but even if we make progress to bring it up to 20%, it has massive impact on the country. Urbanization first, because I think now too many jobs are centered around the cities. Until unless we take jobs to the people into the hinterland, I don't think we will be making progress. Financialization is key because if we need to attract more jobs, we need to attract more formal employers. India is a hostile habitat for entrepreneurs today. And access or easy access to capital is going to be part of that. And finally, human capital, which is having us, a large number of youth out there who've been invested on, who've got the right kind of skill sets, who've been given access to the kind of tools they need to build their careers is going to be critical. Specific questions on benefits, if I can just take a couple of more minutes on the benefits. I guess for us, everyone who's on TeamLease roles, they're as good as any other employee in any other organization, and hence each and every benefit, all statutory benefits which are applicable to any regular employee on full-time roles is applicable to any of the employees that we have. But if you have any specific aspects that you can think of, which we can add on to, I'm more than happy to talk about it. And the overall point on aggregation is that dangerous for a country like India. I think for us to hit scale, and we've been having discussion on scale, while aggregation has its own set of challenges, but the juncture at which India is, to solve the quantity problem, we have to rely on aggregation models because that helps us be effective at scale, and that's really the need of the hour. So,
great. Please join me in thanking our excellent panelists.